tell us a little bit about your impressions of what's unfolding today, not just in the Latino community. You're a Mexican American journalist, but just sort of in general.
So here's what I'm feeling. And I'm trying to keep it all tempered. One, because I'm a journalist, and two, because I'm not all about the hype. But I'm trying to figure out the math, and I'd really have to talk to like a mathematician, because this is in my mind. What I'm beginning to understand is that given the number of people who have early voted and the data that we are getting, for example, that young people, people of color, specifically Latinos and Latinas, have turned out in like 300 percentage, as compared to 4 years ago in terms of early voting. And then you're thinking about the fact that, we've got 100 million pre-votes basically. And I'm doing the math here. I'm just like, are there enough motivated Trump supporters, new voters, who are registering and coming out to the polls early to match that? Is that like where the demographics look? But it doesn't look that way. Like if you think about the demographics it would take to match the numbers that we're talking about, that kind of growth is coming from young people of color. It's not really, you're not really seeing like this surge of white male middle class voters going to the polls for the very first time for Donald Trump. So that's just one thing. Like in my head, I'm like, the math doesn't seem to be playing out that this is all going to be new voters and turnout for him. On the other hand, I think it's very close. I think made and taken. And that's why, for example, I was on Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! Earlier this morning with Chuck Rocha, and we're talking about the fact that if you are a first-time voter, a person of color, a young person, there's no way that you are being tracked. There's no way that you're being polled. There's no way that we have any information about you. And that's what I think, like, you remember 1968, Katie. We were both young, but we remember that, right? Okay, we remember. So it feels kind of like 1968 in an electoral way, in that we're about to witness something that we never could have imagined before, and that was spurred on by all of the tragedy and trauma that we've been living through. Now, I hope I don't have to eat crow, because to me, it's not about like one candidate or another. To me, as a democracy junkie, this is like the coolest thing ever, to see this many people saying, I'm in democracy, I'm participating in this. I mean, it's amazing.
So the turnout you expect will be much higher than in 2016, particularly among young voters?
I do think so. I can't look at the poll because it's on my phone and I'm on my phone. But basically, that's what everything is trending. Naleo just put out, and I put it out on my Twitter, their information about what this young voter turnout looks like. And look, 4 or 5 years ago, when I was on the street reporting, one of the things that was most disturbing, but was real, was talking to many black voters, whether here in Harlem or when I was reporting in North Carolina or across the country. And the number of black voters who I would encounter who would say things like, yeah, I'm just not going to vote this time. And I'd be like, well, why not? And they're like, no, you know what? We did the vote. We put our vote with Barack Obama. It was okay. But now, we're manifesting our vote, the power of our vote, by choosing not to vote. And I remember hearing that early on and just thinking like, well, that's a certain kind of maturation of the black vote. But then we realized that it was a massive disinformation campaign to put that out as a thought, like manifest your vote as a black voter by not voting. If just that percentage of black voters that didn't turn up this time, it's also kind of like it's that makes a huge difference in states like Michigan, Pennsylvania. So Ohio to a certain degree.
There, someone just pointed out there's some first-time Trump voters coming out as well. She says, or he, I'm not sure, the Post has been covering voters and even some first-time voters who have voted for Trump that we can't know until it's over. And another person said, I'm in South Texas. I'm so surprised by the female Latinos who support President Trump. So clearly, it's really, I think one thing that we have to guard against is talking about these demographics as if there's not a lot of diversity within those given demographics. It's interesting that President
Completely.
Trump seems to be making some headway with young Black men. And
You know what
I
I said about that, Katie? I said, it really has nothing to do with the fact that they're Black or they're Latino. It's that they actually like a bully. It's that they actually like a bully. And that they can identify with a bully and somehow find a place in which a bully kind of represents them. Now, we didn't talk about, because I'm usually hypercritical of the Democratic Party and their outreach. So, if the Democratic Party, if Biden and Kamala lose Florida, it was theirs to lose, and it was because they didn't understand the power of the Latino evangelical vote. And because they didn't understand that the Trump administration and later the Trump campaign was making a lot of inroads with Latino, Latina evangelicals and really playing on the issue of fear and trauma, which is hard because as someone who survived, who lived, actually developed PTSD after 9/11, and you understand what PTSD, it's like really no fun. Cubans and Venezuelans have that kind of experience about, leaving an authoritarian regime, and it is PTSD. And the Trump campaign has basically played into that and created a situation where they're like, yeah, we don't want the socialist Biden. And I'm like, Biden is not a socialist. They have made inroads there. In Texas, for example, you have a long tradition of Texas Latinos and Latinas who are staunch Republicans,
mm-hmm.
have been for years, supported Ronald Reagan, supported George H.W. Bush, supported George W. Bush, a long tradition of Latino Republicans. So we can't dismiss that. So you're right. That is coming out. And if Donald Trump wins, it will be, I think, in large part because of Latino and Latina voters. They'll give him that slim margin to do the win. So that is for real. And that's very complicated. I mean, like I said, there's some party politics that's just loyalty, Katie, but then there's another thing, which is how Latinos and Latinas see themselves in this country. It's very complex. It's an issue of identity. In my book, Once I Was You, I write about when I was 8 years old and with my parents on the very far south side in Cicero in Chicago, and my parents were speaking Spanish, and I told them to stop because I was ashamed. And that was in the 60s. So if you're thinking about fast forwarding now, there are many Latinos and Latinas. The last thing they want to do is identify as Spanish speaking, Latino, Latina, I mean, I understand that. They're going to want to not be that.
Mm-hmm. And how about members of your family, Maria? I'm just curious. Do you have many family members here in this, and how are they feeling about the election?
So everyone on my side of the family, either they're in Mexico and they already voted by mail because they're citizens, or they're in the US and they're doing activism. My daughter is talking to me about Texas. My daughter, who just graduated from Brown, is like, Mom, Texas is blue. And I said, no, it's not. She said, yes, but that's my mantra. And I keep on repeating it. It's going to become true. And I'm just like, my daughter is talking to me about Texas voters in this election. So not in my family. Like every family, I think there's a certain amount of anxiety. But I will tell you that somebody who's very close to me from the Rio Grande Valley, somebody who I lo quiero mucho. He's Mexican American, would be like my father, grandfather, rancher, banker, very pro civil rights. He's voting for Donald Trump proudly. And when I asked him why, he said, Donald Trump has been great for my wealth management. And I said, what? He said, he's good for, Wall Street is doing great. My stock market is doing, and I was just like, wow, what happened there? That someone who, was so prolific on the work of civil rights is now actually voting for Trump, but on the issue of the economy, which, by the way, is like the number one issue along with COVID for Latino and Latina voters.
So tell us a little bit before we go about your book, Maria, because I know it's been getting a lot of attention, and it was written up in the was it the Washington Post book review or the New York Times? I think the New York Times, right? And it's been getting.
Yes.
So tell everyone watching about book, a little bit about your book, what it's about, and why you wrote it.
So the book is Once I Was You, a memoir of love and hate in a torn America. Katie, writing a book is really scary for those of us who do this kind of journalism. It's a deadline that is, months away. So I really did not want to write a book. I thought I was going to write a book called Illegal is Not a Noun, because I was going to write like a little pocketbook. Like, remember the ones that you would pick up at the airport back when we were flying? I was like, I'll write a short little pocketbook about never use the term illegal to refer to a human being. And actually, when we got around to doing all of that, the publisher wanted a bigger book, and they said, write the bigger book that is not just your life, but your life as a journalist, as a woman, as a survivor, as an immigrant, multiple things. Write about that and the history of immigration. And so people have really responded to things about the book that are interesting, Katie. There's a lot of talk about, why did you reveal that you have imposter syndrome? And I'm like, because I don't want you to have it. A lot of women have connected with the fact that I came out about being raped. I didn't really understand that had happened to me when I was 16, like Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. I didn't realize, and that's what kind of is a big part of the book, the reveal, is that when I came to this country from Mexico with privilege, by plane, with a green card, they almost took me from my mother. I was almost one of those child who was taken from my mother's arms by an immigration agent. And so there's a lot of kind of reckoning in this book. And it's Raúl Castillo, the actor, read it. He was my first reader, and he said, "Oh my God, I feel like I came out armed with knowledge." And so people are really responding to it. And you're not going to believe, Miss Katie Couric, who mentioned the book today on what show? The Today Show.
Oh, nice. Were you on? Were you for this?
I wasn't on, because you know how hard it is to get an author interview on the Today Show, but they did a wrap up of like the best November reads, and mine was the best memoir.
Oh, congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's well, I'm so proud of you, and it must have been really cathartic and harrowing to write the book, Maria. And when you think about immigration is a big complicated issue, but how can the immigration problem, or how can the immigration situation, I don't want to characterize the problem, but how can we better manage and help people without maintaining some kind of border for our country? What is the best way to handle this in your view?
Well, the reality, Katie, is right now we don't have an immigration situation, an immigration problem. We don't. There is zero net migration. The refugee system has essentially shut down to, just a few thousand. So we don't have that problem. What this country has is an international human rights crisis. And that means it's an emergency. So the level of dehumanization that we are all experiencing while we're doing this and going to brunch and voting, there are children and women and men who are being held in inhuman conditions. The most recent thing we know, that women's uteruses were taken out of their bodies. We know that at a minimum 545, and it's much more than that, children, in the world's most advanced country that can send, men and women to the moon, but they can't find parents? What is that? So where we have gone now is at a level of horror and pain that is the Trump administration talks about them wanting to purposefully do this to punish people. It is using people as and policies as a way of using bodies to kind of say it stops with you. So so that's where we are. Like at this point, this has gone beyond immigration. This is human beings. We are living at a time when a black man can be murdered in front of everybody. George Floyd, may he rest in peace. That is not a police involved murder. That is an extrajudicial killing. And we're all seeing it. On the other side, babies, children, women, men are being systematically abused, raped, tortured, psychologically tortured. All of this is there. We've reported about it. So once we know this, it needs to stop. And that's why, assuming that Joe Biden, not assuming, but let's just say if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris win, well, Joe Biden already made a commitment that he was going to deal with this in the first 100 days. But the entire thing needs to be shut down.
Yeah,
And Katie,
the whole
I
system.
was just, yeah, I was just going to say that, I don't know the last time that you were on the border. I was there in January. And Katie, I crossed that border my whole life, like the actual border or flying in and out. Katie, the border right now is such a disgrace to Americans. It looks like the Berlin Wall at the height of the separation. Barbed wire, razor wire everywhere, militarization. Please understand that there are not hundreds of thousands of people who are trying to get into the United States. That is not happening. These are thousands, a few thousand people who are refugees. They are running for their lives. And so we have to, as journalists, reframe and put the truth as to what's happening. It's not the way the Trump administration has portrayed it.
And so many are coming from Central America, from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, where they face just are living in such fear of their lives and their family, and wish that situation could somehow improve, Maria, in some of those countries.
Well, it's going to take all of us, Katie. Look, democracy is a verb. You and I covered the stories of the United States intervening in Central America back in the 80s. So we should not be surprised. Sorry about the siren, but we're in Harlem. We should not be surprised that that continues, and comes back at us. The United States has been involved in Central America for decades, over 100 years. And so the best thing that could happen is that if there is a kind of reckoning with that, owning that responsibility. And again, here's what people need to remember. People do not really want to leave their countries. Even Honduras, which is, one of the murder capitals of the world, it's a beautiful country with like a super wonderful vibe and giving people an extraordinary geography. People don't want to leave their homeland. So all of us have to be a part of, again, retaking this whole dynamic and helping Honduras, Centro America, El Salvador, Guatemala to be the better countries. But we have to own our the United States has to own its responsibility in creating the destabilization there to begin with.
Yeah, it's such an important issue, complicated, and has been such a conundrum for politicians who have tried to come up with the system, because I think there's so much misinformation. It's so politically charged, and hopefully we can come up with a much more humane, workable system that can accept people who really fear for their lives. And I always do think that we're a nation of immigrants, and that's what makes this country so extraordinary. And so to turn our backs on people who are coming here because of, they really they fear for their lives, is something that we need to find much more compassion for those people. But anyway, Maria, it's fun talking to you, and congratulations on your book. Tell us
Thank
again
you.
why you called it what you called it, so we can.
Right. So first, Katie, remember you owe me a picture of you with my book, okay, so we can
Oh, I
put you on our
know.
Instagram. Okay. So we need to get you with your
I'm
little.
actually around looking for it before we sat down, and I put it somewhere, but I will.
All right. So so here's the thing. The opening scene in my book is something that many of us who were in airports may have witnessed and not even known it. Um, the moving of children, the trafficking of children from the border. Um, if you ever traveled in an airport, you may have seen a group of of kids that looked Mexican, and they were all wearing like ill-fitting sweatsuits, but they all looked really sad. And you're like, they looked like a football team or a soccer team, but they are different ages. Those were the children who were being transported. And so I ended up seeing one of these little girls and a group of kids in the McAllen airport early one morning. That's the opening scene. And I say that I was witnessing the greatest horror of the United States in the gentlest of ways. I just approached her and started having a conversation with her. She had been taken from her uncle from Guatemala. She had no idea where she was going. She had been in that converted Walmart where they were housing children in cages. And then at the end, we are not allowed to speak to them. So just so people understand, the definition of somebody being trafficked is that they don't have access to their documents. They don't know who is transporting them. They don't know where they're going. And they've been told not to speak to anyone like these children. So in the end, I had to speak to them. I was prohibited from speaking to them. So I just started talking out loud. And I said in Spanish, I want you to hear me. I want you to know that I see you, little girl. And then I wrote, I see you because once I was you. And at that point, it's part of this long thing that one, I do see myself in these children, as we all should. We should see our children in them. I mean, that would be my greatest hope, right, Katie, is that, as you said, that we develop compassion and learn how to see ourselves in the people most unlike us. But then, of course, in the book Reveal, it was that, no, I almost was one of these young people in very different circumstances. But if my mother hadn't yelled and screamed and made a scene in the Dallas airport, that agent would have taken me. He said to my mom, we're going to put her in quarantine. Off you go to Chicago. And she just said, I'm not leaving, and started screaming. And they said, let's do something to make this woman be quiet. And that's how I was not taken. So it goes deep.
Well, I'm so happy the book has gotten been so praised and warmly received. And if any of our followers want to check it out,
Totally. And if you check it out, you guys find me on Instagram. I'll send you a signed book plate. Just say, hey, I just got the book. Take a picture because we're doing our Instagram takeover, and then DM me, and I'll send you with a stamp via US mail a signed book plate so you can put it in your book.
and it's Once I Was You. And Maria, great to see you. I hope that we can see each other. Whoa, see each other in person.
What
And
did you just do, Katie?
I, I mean, I hold breath. Can't really see what's truly going on behind the scenes here, but great to
Same
see.
here.
And everyone's sending you a lot of love, and they can't wait to read your book. And go to Amazon, right, or go to your local bookstore, or or you can go to my newsletter. We're going to feature your book in my newsletter, Maria, so
Oh my
people can
God.
sign up for a wake up call by going to katiecouric.com. All right, Maria, take care.
Let's wish public patience, public patience, belief in our democracy. And remember, we've been here before. Remember, Katie, the year 2000? We didn't know for a long time
Yeah.
who was president. So the country kept on going. We're going to be fine. Public patience and hope in democracy.
And also maybe taking a look at our common humanity instead of what's ripping us apart. I really think I always say it, there's so much we have in common if we would just, uh, you know, talk to each other as people and not as
Yeah. And you know what, Katie? That's what I do. I talk to everyone and I That's my job as a journalist, and it's my civic duty as an American. So I'm all about that. Let's just talk to each other. It's a start. It's better than hating each other. Hate is so much work. Whew.
So corrosive. Anyway, all right, Maria. Mwah. Bye, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Bye,
Okay,
everybody.
bye. If you guys like what you see, subscribe right here.